If the world was taken over by starving vampires, and you are one of the last human beings on the planet, what would you do? These creatures will stop at nothing to hunt you down for food. So I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the vampire plague in Daybreakers. This man is going to come back from the dead. Dr. Edward here is a hematologist working for a pharmaceutical company and has been hired to invent a substitute for blood, but there's been no progress. 10 years ago, a pandemic turned almost everyone into vampires, and now the entire world is running out of food. Starting his work shift, the doctor steps out of the elevator and passes by a tank filled with humans. They're harvesting them for blood supply, but even though he thinks it's evil, it's the only thing keeping vampires alive. Later that night, the CEO calls for an emergency meeting with the board of directors, and they have bad news. Their scientists have discovered that without blood, every vampire on the planet will turn into savage monsters before dying. With less than 5% of the human population remaining, there's only enough blood to keep the vampire race alive for one more month, and they're willing to do whatever it takes before everyone goes extinct. After the meeting, the doctor heads to the lab and asks his coworker how their research is going. The man tells him that the substitute is ready to be tested on vampires, but he's going to immediately regret this. The doctors move to the operating room where Edward here administers the compound into their test subject. But the man's temperature begins to rapidly increase, and that's when things go horribly wrong. Suddenly, he convulses on the gurney and his face starts to boil. No one has any idea what's going on, and the researchers hold the man down as he dies on the operating table. The experiment is a failure, and now they're one day closer to global extinction. Edward drives back home, depressed as he listens to the news. But that's when he notices something horrifying. Looking in the mirror, he discovers that his ears are mutating, and it's the first sign of blood withdrawal. The man is so distracted that he almost collides with another vehicle, veering away at the last second until he comes to a stop. Worried about the other driver, he rushes to the SUV to check on the passengers, when suddenly a woman shoots him straight in the arm with a crossbow, warning the man to stay away. The others get out of the car, and that's when he realizes that they're all human. Okay, these humans are literally an endangered species, but their blood is the only food source for the entire vampire race. This is a serious problem, and to make matters worse, in the board meeting, this man explicitly said that they'll all turn into monsters if they don't have human blood. That means they can't use animals as a substitute, and with only 5% of the human population remaining, both species are now facing another mass extinction. Now, the advantage here is that science can help solve this problem, and modern research tells us that this is actually possible. In 2017, hematologists in the UK have successfully grown red blood cells from scratch. They do this by taking skin samples and reprogramming them into pluripotent stem cells, which can basically turn into any type of cell in the human body. This is exactly what these vampire doctors need to do, but there's one problem with this strategy that they haven't even considered yet. To figure out how many cells we need to produce, we have to factor in what a vampire's daily requirements are. As it turns out, human blood contains about 700 kilocalories per liter, so an average adult will need to drink around 3 liters to meet their energy requirements each day. The problem is there are roughly 18 trillion blood cells in a 3-liter bag, and even with modern technology, it takes 88 culture samples to produce only 8 millimeters of blood. This is massively inefficient compared to humans, who naturally create blood cells 60 times faster. Now, with this information, it's logical to think that if vampires had their own private stock of human slaves, they'd be able to draw blood whenever they need. The reason this wouldn't work is because even when we donate blood, we can only give half a liter every 56 days. When your resource is this limiting, the only solution to the problem is population control. Every time someone is turned into a vampire, it's a step closer to extinction, so this should be made illegal on punishment of death. Another thing we know about vampire lore is that they can hibernate without blood for extremely long periods of time. Now, it's not clear if this race of vampires have the same ability, but if they do, then we can use China's model of transport restriction as a template to manage the vampire population. During the 2008 Olympics, the Chinese government only allowed half of its population to use the roads at any one time. Cars with an even-numbered license plate were allowed to drive one day, and odd-numbered vehicles were allowed to drive the next. This was a brilliant strategy that allowed everyone to still use the roads without traffic congestion. Since vampires are immortal, I would follow this example by ordering 50% of the population to go into 100 years of hibernation. This would help maintain the human to vampire ratio so we won't deplete our only resource. Every century, they must go back into hibernation by law, and the sleeping population can wake up to have their turn. Together, these solutions will help prevent what's known as a Malthusian dilemma, so that the vampire population doesn't overtake their ability to produce food. The group suddenly hears sirens and sees police lights flashing in the distance. Knowing the humans are in danger of being captured, Edward quickly tells them to hide in his car. They're terrified, but with no better options, they all take the vampire's advice and get inside. With the press of a button, he tints the windows so no one can see the passengers and waits for the cops to arrive at the scene. Pulling up next to the vehicle, the cops ask him if he knows where the others went, and he lies, telling the officers that they went in the opposite direction. They drive away, leaving Edward alone, and the refugees get out of the car, thanking the vampire for his help. But they have no idea this one man will save the entire human race. Later, the vampire goes home and relaxes when his brother Frank arrives with a birthday present. Moving into the kitchen, the doctor discovers it's a wine bottle filled with pure human blood. The brother pours a glass to celebrate, but Edward hears offended and turns it down. He won't drink anything harvested from a person and dumps the bottle into the sink, wasting the most valuable resource on the planet. Furious, the brother throws a fit and hurls the bottle across the room, leaving a bloody stain on the wall. He grabs his bag to leave when a mutated creature suddenly enters the house. The vampires back away in shock as the monster smells the food and goes straight for the source, licking the glass of blood clean. Frank quickly steps in to grab a knife off the counter, but the creature suddenly turns around and throws him across the room, leaving Edward alone to fend for himself. This monster is more powerful than they realized as it backs the man into a corner, and Frank stands up to finish it off. Suddenly, the mutated vampire jumps into the air, planting its feet onto the ceiling, but this was its biggest mistake. The brother lunges in for the attack, and with one swing, cuts the monster's head clean off. Later, the police arrive at the scene, and one of them tells Edward that these break-ins have been occurring across the entire neighborhood. That's when this investigator finds a wedding ring inscribed with the names of Lillian and Carl. The doctor recognizes the names and realizes the monster was his gardener. The vampire drank his own blood to stave off his hunger, but it only accelerated the mutation. It's a clear sign that the blood shortages are getting worse, and this is going to happen to everyone if he doesn't find a cure soon. Okay, this guy needs a better security system. A monster just broke into his house without triggering an alarm, but what's surprising is that 2 weeks ago, he looked completely normal. Now, the reason this matters is because it tells us how quickly the vampire race will go extinct based on the man's socioeconomic status. As a gardener for a high-end gated community, he would likely have a salary of around $37,000 a year. This tells us that on a lower middle-class income, you wouldn't be able to afford human blood to survive. Since this income bracket accounts for over 60% of the global population, 4.8 billion monsters will be roaming the streets in less than a week. As horrifying as that sounds, it actually reveals an interesting scientific opportunity. These creatures prove that vampires are sensitive to highly adaptive genetic mutation, and it's exactly what we should be taking advantage of. If it were me, instead of looking for blood substitutes, I'd put all our resources into modifying the genes that cause vampires to rely on human blood. Now, in nature, all mammals have certain genes that allow infants to extract vital nutrients from our mother's milk. In animals, these genes are active for only a few weeks, after which the genes are turned off and their bodies can't digest milk at all. Humans, however, have adapted through evolution to keep these genes active, and it makes us one of the only mammals on the planet that can still drink milk as adults. It all comes down to a few simple differences in our DNA, and with the power of CRISPR technology, this could be modified. We've already been using genetically modified crops since 1994, and that's why we should use the same tools to target the vampire's food requirements as well. If I were Edward here, I would test this theory by engineering a virus to shut off the gene that allows vampires to drink human blood. If this virus can modify their genetic code to extract the same nutrients from animals, it could save the human race. This would allow us to use the existing infrastructure to farm enough livestock and feed the vampire population before they turn into monsters. A typical Angus cow takes 2 years to fully mature and are sold when they weigh around 1,200 pounds. At this size, a single cow would have as much as 31 liters of blood, while humans only have 5. Now, there are currently 1 billion cows around the world being bred as livestock, and if we include other animals like sheep, chickens, and pigs, that's over 41 billion liters of blood for the vampires to drink. This is definitely a stopgap measure, because it's still not enough to meet the daily requirements of 7 billion vampires. But if we incorporate our new law to alternate hibernation schedules, this blood will last much longer, allowing time for humans to repopulate. The next morning, Edward wakes up to the sound of an alarm. Someone has broken into his house, and he carefully walks over to his doorway, turning the lights on to reveal the woman from last night. Her crossbow is pointed straight at his chest, but instead of shooting him, she reveals the humans have been looking for a trustworthy vampire. He's willing to hear her out, and she puts down the crossbow, telling him there's something that's better than a blood substitute. The woman hands him a note before leaving his house, and he realizes they are directions to a secret meeting. That afternoon, Edward goes to meet with the human and finds her waiting for him, but something's not right. She tells the man that her contact wants to talk in private, and the vampire drives over to park, worried that this might be a trap. Getting out of his car, the doctor stays in the shade and circles around to find a man sitting there in the shadows. He steps forward and introduces himself as Lionel, revealing that he used to be a vampire but managed to cure himself and become fully human again. The doctor can't believe it and asks how this could have happened, but they're interrupted. The woman walks forward and they realize she's been held up at gunpoint as Lionel aims his crossbow at the armored man. The vampire lifts up his mask, telling him to drop the gun, and the doctor realizes it's his brother Frank. He overheard their conversation at the house and followed Edward here, but that's when they notice a military vehicle heading straight for them. Spotting her opportunity, the woman suddenly pushes the soldier out into the sunlight before Lionel quickly runs up and knocks the man out. The humans are about to jump into his car, but the Humvee shoots it, disabling the engine. With no other choice, Edward tells them to get in his car, and they all run inside, driving away as fast as they can. The group manages to get back on the road, but another Humvee has found them and starts firing its gun. The rear window is torn open by bullets, leaking dangerous sunlight into the vehicle. The woman covers up the hole, but a lucky shot destroys the cameras, leaving the vampire no way to drive safely. Lionel quickly switches seats with them and takes the wheel, doing his best to outmaneuver the soldiers, but the military vehicles are catching up. Seeing a broken bridge in front of them, the man realizes they can escape the Humvees and drives straight over the metal beams. They've crossed to the other side, and the soldiers can't chase them anymore, but things are about to get much worse. Okay. These guys are not thinking straight. A cure would obviously be worth investigating, but we have to look at the context here. If we go on the run, we won't have the resources we need to figure out what caused Lionel here to turn back into a human. And even if we could figure it out, we wouldn't be able to synthesize an antidote without the support of a massive institution to distribute it across the world. For this exact reason, the best way to handle this is to appeal to corporate greed and help them make as much money from it as possible. Right now, this company is trying to make a blood substitute, but it's not just so they can save the vampire race. With a patent on fake blood, this company would be able to leverage this product over billions of dying vampires and will quickly become the largest business enterprise the world has ever seen. If everyone has the ability to become human, they won't need to drink blood for survival, and this company's product will be useless. This one man has the ingredients to topple a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and that's why the CEO here would never let these people live unless they could turn it into an even higher profit. If it were me, I would convince Lionel to follow me back to the pharmaceutical company, where we tell the board of directors that this man has a cure, but it's going to make them more money than a blood substitute ever could. Since we know that this pandemic was started by a virus, then we can assume the answer to the cure is in this man's genome, because it's changed his body on a cellular level. This is great news for a greedy pharmaceutical company, because it means they can ignore extrinsic factors like water and sunlight and use the man's blood to develop a treatment instead. This way, we can ensure humanity's survival, but at a cost. Since vampires are causing a mass extinction event, the world governments would mandate that everyone must stay medicated for the rest of their lives, keeping them human. This company would have both the patent and monopoly on the drug, and it would make them more money than anything in the history of the world. It's pure evil. But if these guys can't even keep a secret from Edward's brother, they'll never discover a cure in 30 days without help. The only way you'd be able to convince vampires to all become human in 30 days is if it's so profitable that they wouldn't be able to resist. That night, they pull over at an overlook to talk, and that's where Lionel tells the doctor his secret. He explains that 9 years ago, he was driving during the day, but had been so deprived of blood that he lost consciousness. The man ended up crashing his car and was thrown through the windshield, instantly catching fire from the sunlight before falling into the lake nearby. When he woke up, the man discovered that he was somehow cured of his vampirism. The woman explains they're trying to recreate this effect in a safe environment, but need Edward's help to replicate the cure. Meanwhile, at the pharmaceutical company, the brother Frank meets with Edward's boss, and the man asks the soldier for help, explaining that if he brings his brother back to continue his work, he won't be arrested. With little choice, the vampire agrees to hunt his brother down, knowing that if he doesn't succeed, all hell will break loose. Out in the countryside, the group arrives at the humans' hideout, which is a vineyard far from civilization, and they head inside the building. The doctor is given a tour of the base camp and is surprised to see another vampire here. It's Senator Wes Turner, a vampire politician who openly supports human rights and wants to help them survive. He hopes that they'll be able to work together and push for vampire society to make a cure. It's the only way for both races to survive, but they're running out of time. The next morning, the doctor analyzes Lionel's blood, and the results are astounding. This man's car accident cured his vampirism, and Edward realizes that in order to reproduce the same effect, they'll need to burn a vampire in the sunlight to test their theory. Taking a break, the doctor walks out of his office, and the woman asks how the man became a vampire. He reveals that his brother was involved, but quickly changes the subject, asking her about these metal barrels. She tells him that they're fermentation tanks, and they go inside to check it out, making Edward realize they have the perfect way to safely burn a vampire. They start making preparations for the experiment, but their plans are about to fall apart. That night, a convoy of humans are driving back to the secret hideout when one of the wheels suddenly pops. The group is forced to stop and turn on their floodlights, illuminating the road. Getting out of his car, this man investigates the problem and discovers a tranquilizer dart sticking out of the tire. He realizes that they're about to be ambushed as more darts come flying out of the darkness. An army of vampires in military uniforms attack, and the humans try their best to fight back, but they're completely outnumbered. This girl calls into home base, where Lionel here answers on the other end, and she reveals that the vampires have found their convoy. The line suddenly goes dead, and the man realizes their base is about to be compromised, so they need to evacuate. The other humans are terrified and decide to take shelter at the senator's house where the vampire soldiers won't find them. They start packing up the camp, but the doctor here refuses to leave. With the sun rising, this might be their only chance to test the experiment, and the group decide to remain behind while the others escape. Okay, these guys are making the right decision. If this wine fermentation tank is their best chance at recreating the cure, then staying to figure it out is the most logical thing to do. These guys, on the other hand, are making a terrible mistake. This convoy is traveling through the country looking for stranded humans to save, but they're going about it the wrong way. First of all, they're driving at night, which is literally the only time that vampires can walk the earth. It would be a lot safer if they traveled during the day because they wouldn't be exposing themselves to unnecessary risk. Now, we still have to plan for the worst, and that means figuring out the most effective way to fight a vampire. If we look here, we can see that these soldiers explode when they're shot, and this is because one of the only ways a vampire will die is by a stake to the heart. But the problem is that this gives you a narrow target of only 3.5 inches. This is not efficient, and we need to take advantage of another weakness and weaponize it against them. Now, the main reason vampires die from the sun is because their biology is too sensitive to ultraviolet light, and prolonged exposure will burn them to ashes. With this in mind, I would have converted all of these spotlights into UV. With ultraviolet radiation, the vampire soldiers wouldn't be able to get any closer than 10 meters without frying to death, and simple strategies like this would give us a better chance to survive. We can even take this idea one step further by placing UV lights around the perimeter of the base camp, and the fact that they didn't take advantage of this is incredibly stupid. Now, this actually highlights a really important point about our survival. The biggest benefit we have is sunlight, because for about 12 hours, the entire world belongs to humans exclusively. The vampire race is already going extinct, and the only thing humans need to do is wait them out. If we stay hidden at night and only go out during the day, the vampires will die from starvation, and as long as a small handful of humans survive, we'll be able to repopulate the planet once again as the dominant species. Meanwhile, at the pharmaceutical company, this girl wakes up inside of an office and looks around the room, terrified of what's going to happen to her. Spotting a glass knife on the table, she quickly grabs it for protection just as the elevator doors open and the CEO steps out. The girl bravely demands he let her friends go, but the vampire ignores her, amazed at how much she's grown up. This man is her father, and he's relieved to see his daughter still alive, but tells the girl it's too late to save her friends. Angry, she pushes him away and runs towards the elevator just as he realizes he's been stabbed. She's about to make her escape, but that's when a soldier steps out and knocks her unconscious. The next morning, the group is finally ready to test their experiment, as the doctor waits inside the tank. With everything ready, Lionel lifts up a window cover and lets the sunlight stream into the chamber, setting the vampire on fire. He quickly shuts the window closed and they vent the oxygen out of the tank, extinguishing Edward in seconds, but the doctor still doesn't have a pulse. He's not human yet, and they're running out of time, because a convoy of vampire soldiers are already on their way. Trying one more time, they let sunlight into the tank, setting Edward on fire again. It's a brutal experiment, but this time, there's a pulse on the heart monitor, and their test worked. The doctor has turned back into a human, and it means there's a chance to save the human race. Suddenly, the vampire soldiers break into the building and search for any survivors, but when they open the fermentation tank to look inside, no one's there. The group hid themselves before the vampires arrived, but their luck is about to run out. At the pharmaceutical company, the CEO is recovering from his injury and asks to meet with Frank to give him a special mission. He wants the soldier to turn his daughter into a vampire, and the man agrees to help. Following orders, Frank walks into the cell where the boss's daughter has been kept prisoner. The girl is terrified and begs him to stay away, but the soldier ignores her, promising she won't have to be afraid. Furious, she shoves him against the door to keep him away, but it's no use, as the man bites down on her neck to drink her blood. Later, the boss visits his daughter's cell and finds out from the guard that she hasn't been drinking the blood they've provided. Going inside, he checks on her, but is horrified to discover that she's been feeding off of herself. The girl knows this will mutate her into a monster, but would rather die than live as a vampire. Angry, she lunges at her father, and the guard comes running into the room to drag her away, as the CEO realizes that he just made his biggest mistake. Okay, this is really f***ed up. The CEO has finally reunited with his only daughter, but instead of accepting that she wants to stay human, he used Frank to infect her with the virus. This is incredibly selfish, and was also the stupidest thing he could do. Right now, they're not any closer to creating a blood substitute, and the vampire race is on the brink of extinction. So instead of giving her immortality, he's just given her a 30-day expiration date. It's extremely short-sighted, and it's the same kind of thinking that is causing vampires to go extinct. Now, there's actually an important observation here that we can use for our survival. When his daughter started drinking her own blood, the father explained that this would speed up her mutation. What's interesting is that this kind of mutation is actually observable in the real world as well, and we might be able to use it to wipe out the vampire race even faster. In 1961, medical researchers were investigating a strange epidemic of Kuru disease, which is an incurable neurodegenerative disorder that's caused by abnormally folded proteins known as prions. What they discovered was absolutely horrifying, because they realized that this disease was being spread through cannibalism. The tribe members would consume the bodies of the dead by exhuming the corpses after burial and feed them to the women and children of the village. The reason this matters is because it's extremely similar to how these vampires are affected by their own blood. If they cannibalize themselves, their biology begins to mutate, and just like the Kuru prion disease, it's 100% fatal. With this in mind, one of the smartest things they could have done was infect the distribution of human blood supply with vampire blood, causing rapid cellular degeneration. It's obviously too late to try now, but with the past 10 years to turn this plan to action, it might have been possible. We have to remember that this vampire pandemic would have been gradual, and for at least half a decade, humans still outnumbered them, so ambitious strategies like these would have been much more effective to use against them. At the hideout, Lionel climbs out of the wine container to check if the coast is clear, and is relieved to see that the soldiers have left. The humans walk out of the building, and the doctor enjoys the sunlight for the first time in years, while his friend finds a brand new car parked nearby. They drive to the senator's cabin, hoping to reunite with their allies, but they can tell something's wrong. Heading inside the building, they find dead bodies everywhere, and the place is in ruins. All the human refugees have been killed, and they're beginning to lose hope, but Edward tells them that he has a plan. Meanwhile, the blood shortages are getting worse, and vampires across the world are quickly turning into uncontrollable monsters. With no good options, the military have been called in to hunt down the mutants and purge them all. Chaining the creatures to an armored car, the soldiers drag them out into the sun, but that's when Frank here recognizes one of them. It's the boss's daughter, and the man can only watch as the mutants are executed in front of everyone. It's horrific, and as his fellow vampires cheer for their deaths, he realizes that he's made a huge mistake. That night, the doctor's co-worker comes home, but when he turns on the lights, he sees Edward has been waiting for him along with the other humans. They sit down to talk, and he reveals to the vampire that they've discovered a cure and need his help. The man can't believe what he's hearing, but before they can tell him the treatment, his phone suddenly starts ringing. Nervous, the vampire answers it and tells the others that it's his ex-wife. They let him take the call in private, and the man walks into the other room for some space. But as they're waiting, the woman notices that the man has gone quiet. Suspicious, she goes to check on him, but that's when a tranquilizer dart suddenly flies straight into her chest. In the other room, Edward walks over to his co-worker's jacket and discovers his phone has been on call with the company's office. Hearing the woman drop to the floor, the men run over and find a soldier dragging her through the doorway. More vampires enter the building to capture them, and the humans manage to escape, heading into the underground walkway. Losing their trail, the survivors find shelter in an abandoned building. The men take a moment to catch their breaths, but that's when the light comes on and reveals a mutated vampire standing right in front of the doctor. It tries to attack him, but suddenly an arrow flies in and kills the monster. Turning around, the man realizes it's his brother, and the soldier is surprised to find that Edward is no longer a vampire. The men slowly approach him as the doctor reveals he's found a cure, but Frank refuses to put down his weapon, explaining they'll be hunted forever if they turn back now. The doctor begs him to help rescue the woman, and the soldier agrees. But there's a problem. He's overwhelmed by his instincts and lunges straight for Lionel's neck, drinking his blood. The doctor throws the vampire off his friend and gets ready to kill his own brother, but discovers something that will change the world. Frank has turned back into a human, and it gives Lionel an idea, telling the others the only way to rescue the woman is to trick the CEO into curing himself. Okay, they've just discovered that drinking cured blood can turn everyone back into humans. That means the more they share their blood, the faster they can get rid of vampires for good. Instead, these idiots want to take their cure to infect one man to save their friend Audrey. It's incredibly stupid, and since this cure would destroy the entire company, they do everything in their power to stop that from happening. It's important to remember that these three men are humankind's only hope for survival, and that makes their blood the most precious resource in the world. Whatever decision we make here needs to achieve two things. The first is that we have to protect the cure at all costs, and walking into a building of starving vampires is possibly the biggest risk you could think of. Secondly, we need to make sure our cured blood is distributed to as many vampires as possible. The problem with their strategy is that even if we cured the CEO, it's only one man, and his wealth will isolate him from being bitten by other vampires. Now, the average CEO in America can make 350 times more money than their employees, so we have to assume that this guy has a massive private supply of human blood. That means if we cured him, he could still feed a security team for years to keep him safe, and this would prevent the cure from spreading. With all this in mind, the smartest thing we can do is abandon the woman that's being held hostage and find the safest way to spread our blood into the population. We can't walk out and get bitten by vampires because they'll kill us in the process. So if it were me, I'd use blood donation protocol and drain 1 pint of blood from each person. This way, we're still healthy enough to run away from danger if our location is discovered. We can then leave cups out on the street for vampires to find, and when they drink the blood, they'll turn human. Now, judging by how much blood this guy drank, it's fair to assume that 100 milliliters is more than enough to cure someone. That means with 1 pint from each of us, we could infect at least 14 people, each of them eaten by more vampires, exponentially spreading the cure. In the field of epidemiology, this is known as an R-naught, and if every single cured vampire infects 14 others, it would have twice the rate of infection as the most recent pandemic the world has experienced. That night, Edward heads to the pharmaceutical company alone and is taken up to the CEO's office where he finds Audrey tied down to a chair. His boss gloats as he holds a wine glass full of the woman's blood, and the doctor begs for help, explaining that he can't handle being human anymore. The man asks him what he wants, and the doctor requests that he turns them both into vampires. In exchange, he'll show him their cure to increase the human population. Dismissing the guards, the CEO drops a truth bomb on Edward, revealing that a blood substitute has already been developed and he no longer needs him alive. Knowing this is the only chance he has to put his plan into motion, the doctor mocks him for turning his daughter into a vampire, but not having the courage to do it himself. Triggered, the man bites down on Edward's neck to drink his blood and falls straight into the doctor's trap. He suddenly begins to feel weak and realizes the man's blood was poisoned as he reaches to set off an alarm. Acting quickly, the doctor breaks a chair using one of the pieces to bar the door closed. With the room secure, Edward reveals that his treated vampire blood has cured the man and he's just been turned back into a human. Downstairs, the soldiers have arrived to rescue the CEO, but that's when they hear someone coming down the elevator. The men take position, but when the doors open, they find the CEO tied to a chair, now fully human. Overwhelmed by their hunger, the soldiers run into the elevator to drain his blood and savagely eat the man alive. Meanwhile, the human survivors make it down to the lobby, but they're held up at gunpoint by a squad of soldiers. There's no way to escape, and they're about to surrender when a car suddenly crashes through the front doors, swerving to a stop. The brother steps out, shooting at the guards to give Edward a chance to run for the exit, but before they can leave, reinforcements arrive and the lobby is flooded with an army of soldiers. Frank begs the men to let them go, but seeing how hungry they are, he realizes there's only one thing he can do. The man surrenders and lets the vampires attack him, sacrificing himself to save his brother's life. Suddenly, a security guard runs out of a door and drags the woman into another room. Edward chases after her and manages to fight out the remaining vampires, driving his weapon straight through the heart. They're lucky to still be alive and take a moment to catch their breaths, but that's when the doctor notices the surveillance monitors. Outside, the soldiers have eaten his brother alive, but are all starting to turn human from his cured blood. The men are shocked, but the rest of the vampire army can only smell fresh meat. Rushing in, they start attacking the newly turned humans as the cure continues to spread. When Edward finally walks back into the lobby, only a handful of soldiers are left standing, and all of them are now human. They walk through the room of bodies towards the exit, but someone suddenly shoots the rest of the soldiers to death. It's Edward's co-worker, and the man will let them spread the cure any further, but just as he's about to kill them, an arrow pierces his chest. The man explodes into a fireball, and the survivors are relieved to see that Lionel has saved them. With the friends reunited, they realize there's still hope for the human race and drive out into the sunset, ready to cure the vampires one hickey at a time.
But what do you think? How would you beat Daybreakers? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.